Hi, and welcome back to the third episode of the story of my journey. If you haven't listened to the first and second episode yet, I would suggest that you go back and do that. Otherwise, I am just going to pick up where I left off. So, here we go. In a world of dreams, that would have been it. Everyone lived happily ever after. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case. At first, the excitement of being home finally and being able to exhale a little bit after these trying times did us good. We got to introduce her to friends and family, still very cautiously, since she was considered to be a highly sensitive and susceptible to infection. But now, the things that had been mostly put aside during this intense period had to claim its space. When Greta was 4 days old, the male partners of my company started talking about my shares and my stake in the company. I remember I felt this rage in combination with utter weakness and hopelessness to the totality of my situation. I had to protect both my babies like a lioness. There's no point in going into too much detail about these situations, but throughout the entire hospital stay, I felt attacked from the outside world, having to stand up for myself and struggling with codependency towards my sister in parallel to everything else I was experiencing. That took an extra toll on my already fragile state. I tried to block it out as much as possible, but it kept pouring in regardless. So after coming home and there was some space for my being to exert its needs, in between the meticulous medical and feeding schedule of my baby, my body started to speak up. At first, it wasn't super clear and easy to pinpoint. I was just feeling like shit. I kept going to the doctor and described my situation and symptoms over and over again without getting the help I needed. He managed to diagnose me with PMDS, which is a very severe case of PMS, where I was hormonally depressed 2 weeks out of every month. It was as if I was devoured into this black hole where I was free falling. He, as per usual, prescribed me antidepressants, not looking into the root cause, just putting a band aid on the cut. Even though the other 2 weeks of each month were less horrible, I was still feeling like crap. Went back to my doctor over and over again without any real help. After a year of this, I started doing my own research. I gathered all my symptoms and started comparing them against different diagnoses. In Sweden, we have this diagnosis that could be translated as exhaustion syndrome, adrenal fatigue, or severe burnout. It's basically when the body has lost all its energy and it's hard to function, let alone be a good mother or partner. Common symptoms are total loss of energy, dejection, worry, irritability, cognitive impairment, sleep deprivation, somatic symptoms such as dizziness and aches, heart palpitations, heightened sensitivity towards sound and other stimuli, bowel issues, low or non existing capability to handle stress, and so on. When I read about all these symptoms, I felt seen for the first time in a long time, since I checked all those boxes. I had heard about people hitting the wall or getting burned out when working too much. But I hadn't worked that much, so in my narrow mind, I didn't make the connection until it was staring me in the face. I went to my doctor with the same list of symptoms that I had shown him over and over again and showed my list of symptoms of this diagnosis. And he said, "Yes, so what do you want me to do?" Uh, Diagnose me? Help me? Fix me? At this point, I had tried everything I knew to do to be able to start working again when Greta started preschool. I had tried to ignore it. I had tried to get help from a doctor, tried to take it nice and easy, the best way you can when you are on a maternity leave after a huge trauma. I really tried to hold on and fake it until I made it. But at that point, I had to surrender to how I was actually feeling and how bad it actually was. At its worst, I could barely get out of bed. I dragged myself to get Greta to preschool and then went back to rest so that I would be able to pick her up again in the afternoon. Any outside pressure, anything from bigger decisions that I had to be made to just receiving a text that I had to answer, sent me down an anxiety spiral and got my nervous system rattled. I got scared of driving my car. It's hard to describe to someone who hasn't gone through it, but the most commonly experienced sensation is probably that of having a bad flu with high fever. It is possible to do things physically if needed, but the little energy reserve that you have burns out pretty quickly, and a lot of rest is needed to be able to refill those reserves. Only this is not a flu that passes over after a week's time. It goes on and on and on, month after month, year after year, most often with a slight depression as a sprinkle on top. Even though I was absolutely depleted, I was also absolutely determined to get well as soon as possible. I had found myself in a new arena that I wanted to perform my way out of. I talked to a friend that had experienced the same, and she said that it took her 7 years to get back. And I thought to myself, ha, that's not going to be me. I will excel at this challenge and come out on the other side faster than ever. I researched all the areas of mainstream health, such as diet, exercise, supplements, and so on. I implemented them all to the best of my ability while juggling my mother role to a child in need of extra attention and hospital visits. In some weird way, I was also partly living in denial. To not get too depressed, I at the same time felt the need to live a little. So I booked travels abroad thinking they would be a restorative vacation, but always came home equally, if not even more, depleted. To my surroundings, I probably didn't show exactly how bad it was. I showed up to events such as baptisms, graduations, and birthdays, but what no one saw was the recovery period after that energy output. Once in a while, I even went out and gave zero fucks about what would happen to me the following days. I borrowed some fake energy from the old friend alcohol and went out with a bang, only to not only be hungover, but also be depleted energetically for days. Yet again, I felt trapped in my body, hated my situation, and was the biggest victim ever. Not only had I gone through this horrible pregnancy, the traumatic neonatal experience, But I also had to endure all these diagnoses and impairments that never seemed to get better. Meanwhile, the situation with my company had spiraled even more out of control, involving even more people in my close circle, with me in the middle as some kind of mediator, where I felt codependent in all directions. Also feeling like the world's biggest failure to not be able to pitch in the way I wanted to. I was holding on even if I should have let go. At times, I was getting a little bit better, but just the thought of having more pressure than being a mom and recovering always rattled me to my core. Time passed, but the improvements were never good enough. I decided that I had to expand my research and efforts. I started looking into holistic health, such as homeopathy, functional medicine. I took all kinds of tests. I sent my poop to a German lab, tested for different food sensitivities, and looked for inflammation markers. I tried all kinds of treatments: osteopathy, frequency therapy, herbal medicines, celery juicing. I started even more rigid diets and started specialized medicinal yoga with facha rolling. I went to stress rehab, psychologists, therapists. I explored alternative diagnosis such as copper poisoning. You name it, I have done it. But still, nothing. Or not nothing, but not enough to be able to lead a normal life. In the middle of it all, we decided to move out of our city apartment to a rental house while buying and renovating our new permanent house. That put an additional strain on my situation, even though it was actually fun things happening. I remember the introduction days at Greta's new preschool. During the kids' daytime nap, I was so exhausted that I had to take a nap myself. So I explained my situation to the staff and the other parents and took my nap with the other small children in need of their daily nap on the floor. I mean, this need of naps to get through the day had already been going on for years, so why not succumb to it even in public? During this period, there were two parts of me present. One rigid health freak that did everything by the book, whatever the book was at the moment. On the other hand, we had the drowning victim that rebelled against the rigidity, that only wanted to numb it all, that shopped a bit excessively at times, that cared a bit too much about looks at times, using that little energy I had to get my nails done and get a fake tan. In a way, trying to fake my outside so it didn't match my inside, to look better than I felt. It was hard on a daily basis seeing myself in the mirror, a shell of my former self. I used nicotine and alcohol to try to soothe my inner turmoil. On top of the exhaustion syndrome, the PMDS, and PTSD, I also got other ailments such as shingles and weird skin rashes. It just felt like a never ending loop of misery. When trying out these more alternative and holistic approaches, I also started getting closer and closer to the outskirts of spirituality. A lot of Instagram accounts started popping up with affirmations, mindset, spiritual teachings, words of wisdom. In one way, it all felt like a load of crap to me. Since I was so deeply in my victimhood, I couldn't see how these things could possibly help my very physical state. But at the same time, I was desperate for change, so I leaned in a little bit. Many podcasts and Instagram accounts have a mix between holistic health and spirituality. So sometimes I got the latter portion of it whether I wanted it or not. I was a very scientific, matter of fact kind of person, and it was deeply established in me since I was younger that I would never open that door again. I grew up in a free church setting with Christian parents. That was all I knew. Everything was Christian. My friends, my school, our social settings, obviously going to church each Sunday. This might not sound strange if you're from any other country than Sweden, but Sweden is a very secular society. So if you're a Christian and on top of that belong to a free church, then you are really the odd one out, which went fine as long as we were in the bubble. Me not knowing anything else, just thought that this was the way life was and how the world worked. When I was about 11 years old, the bubble burst. All of a sudden, I was changing from my Christian school to a public school. At that point, I didn't really understand why, but I've later on come to understand that the church started being filled with more and more cult vibes, having more opinions on people's everyday choices instead of focusing on the faith and connection to God. On the outside, I was doing fine. I managed, as I always do. I managed to find new friends quickly. I think I even asked someone to be my boyfriend a week in or something. But on the inside, I felt as if I was being fed to sharks. Everything I knew was being questioned. I quickly realized that to survive in this new setting, I had to cover up as much as possible of my background. I became obsessed with acting and being perceived as normal as possible to blend in with the atheists. I was very hesitant to bring friends home where my parents still said grace before dinner. Later on in my healing journey, I have actually realized that this whole process was a trauma for me. To remind you all what trauma is, it's not what happens to you, it's what happens inside you because of what happens to you. Either way, then and there I decided that all I had ever known before was a load of crap, and I closed the door to any connection I might have had. I went into a very scientific approach of life where if you couldn't prove it to me, it wasn't real. So for me to open up this door again, even just a little, was like hell freezing over. Like over my dead body kind of vibe. But yet again, I found myself in a dead body kind of vibe. I started getting bigger and bigger questions spinning in my head. There's got to be more to life than this society that I'm trying to fit into, especially in this weakened state that I was in. So gradually, very slowly, I started opening up to the possibility of getting helped in alternative ways, both physically, mentally, emotionally, and now also spiritually. Even though I shut everything down when I was younger, I had always had this natural access to my life force energy. I have many times felt like a kid on Christmas Eve when going to bed, having a hard time settling down to go to sleep for the sheer excitement of what tomorrow might bring. But that, as I said earlier, started shifting during my university studies. I think that was my first push of realizing that I wasn't living my life, my truth. The second bigger push was my dad's passing. Now I was getting the free falling that went on for years. But I'm a hard nut to crack. If it hadn't been for all of these exact circumstances, my dad's passing, the big trauma with my daughter, and the major decline in my personal health that went on for years, I would have never opened my eyes for what was about to come. So, as I started leaning into this more spiritual side of holistic health, things just started coming my way. Instagram accounts, books, podcasts, space holders, teachers, like minded people, etc. Synchronicities started working its magic. All of a sudden, a friend's friend suggested this medicinal yoga person that for the first time showed me facha rolling. And as I've already mentioned, I had tried it all to mend my poor nervous system. I had gone to 12 weeks of stress rehab where we learned to breathe properly, be present in our bodies, and all of the other good stuff that we were taught. But everything just helped momentarily. When first starting out the breathwork practices, we were asked to count our breaths per minute. A normal person maybe takes around 8 breaths a minute. I was taking 30, gasping like a dog on a hot summer day, constantly. The sensation in my body was as if I just almost got hit by a car, constantly. So, in my state, it wasn't just the lack of energy, it was my totally unbalanced nervous system that never properly went into the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the rest and repair state, which is necessary to heal. I was constantly in the sympathetic nervous system, which is the fight or flight state, which most people are constantly in these days. But there are degrees in hell, right? So I went into this medicinal yoga expert for the first time, and she put a slam ball weighing 20 kilos, which is around 44 pounds, on my belly, and I had a really hard time understand what we were doing and why. But then it came to me as we rolled the ball in different directions and patterns. This was the IBS pain I have carried throughout my entire life. It was as we were massaging the knots out of existence as my tears were pouring down. It wasn't pleasurable at the beginning, I will tell you. But leaving that first appointment, I realized that this is the first time ever in a very long time that I've had a lasting effect on any of my treatments. I continued my day in that soothed state for a longer period than just the duration of the actual session. I was finally making some progress. So, this teacher and another teacher, or mentor, if you may, came into my life through synchronicities. With the other teacher, there was more of the emotional and spiritual side of things. They both taught me and mirrored so much in me: my victimhood, me not standing in my power, my inner child, and my core wounds, the masks we wear, the roles we play, the importance of community and support, the programming we all go through, my lack of boundaries, codependency. They taught me a lot about the spiritual realms, theories, our existence, and the human experience, the importance of energy hygiene, non attachment, and 0 point, the discipline and diligence, humility, kindness, generosity, patience, and pureness needed to go on this healing journey for real. With these teachers and a lot of other influences, I started understanding myself for real for the first time ever. I have always had these deep inner knowings throughout my life, but never really trusted them. I was now realizing that I was letting my intuition guide me more and more. During my life coach education, which I was guided to take, I met so many soul sisters that really was the last puzzle piece that I needed to fully anchor in and integrate the opening of this door into spirituality. I didn't only meet soul sisters there. I met soulmates, best friends, and today they are some of the most important people in my life. Shout out to you guys. You know who you are. Even though I had opened this beautiful door into a new reality where I was healing and with curiosity exploring myself with more compassion than ever before, I still had a lot of work to do. I was still not standing in my power. I still put my teachers on a bit of a pedestal, like I had with my dad, thinking they knew better than me, what was best for me, what I needed, than I knew myself. I was still subconsciously in performance mode. I wanted to perform in this new arena that I had found. I had to navigate when I was spiritually bypassing and when I was being fully authentic with an open heart. I also had some difficulty navigating my old life and my new life, the old self and the new self. I kept my spirituality in the closet for a while, mainly because it was so new to me, a bit fragile, but most importantly, it was so important to me. I didn't want any ignorant or judgmental notions to impact my process and progress. Even though I was feeling more real and authentic than I had felt in my entire life, it was still a very tough journey to go through. A lot of tears have been shed, a lot of fears have been faced, a lot of pain has been felt, a lot of purging and clearing has been done. Everyone has been forgiven, including myself. I have explored a lot of plant medicines in ceremonies such as cacao, blue lotus, hape, kambo, ayahuasca, and so on. I have gone to countless retreats to really face myself and my deepest wounds, blockages, and limiting beliefs, but also to learn new skills, or rather, unlearn old patterns, and now lead a life that is more full of compassion, trust, and love for myself and others. I've gone too far in one direction just to retreat back and find the balance between different polarities, especially when it comes to the masculine and feminine. But more on that in another episode. Eventually, as life happens, Greta's father and I decided to go our separate ways. When faced with life, you either grow together or apart. Even though it was a really tough decision, especially when it came to Greta, we both agreed that it was the right decision for both of us. So, in the midst of it all, I also found myself needing to stand on my own 2 feet. That added to the healing journey, but with these new perspectives I had on life, I also blessed all these lessons that I had learned from all my previous relationships. They all showed me where I wasn't loving myself, where I wasn't giving enough to myself, mirrored my deepest wounds held by my inner child, where I wasn't putting up sufficient boundaries, what I actually longed for, what I actually needed. I came to the conclusion that I need to give myself everything I need and not expect anyone else to fill my voids or act as band aids to my wounds. And it's one thing to say that, and it's a totally different ballpark to live that fully. I went on a solo journey to India for 3 weeks without any plans, without anything to hold on to, no retreats, no teachers, no nothing. To just be with myself. A lot of the time in silence, really facing myself. Nothing to prove, no masks to be worn. Who was I when I didn't know anyone, didn't know the lay of the land, when I had to completely trust my intuition and inner guidance, holding no one's hand? Was I worth something when I wasn't being a mother, not being a present friend, not doing anything of importance? A lot was faced during that journey. Patience was and is a big one for me. I want everything to happen, be fixed, resolved, and I want it now. Greta is mirroring me on a daily basis when it comes to this. I always say to her, "You got to be more patient." And then I laugh at myself when I realize that she's only a reflection of me and what goes on inside of me. Another thing I've had to face as an empath with deep codependent patterns is the urge to be a savior. I so deeply wanted others not to feel the way I have felt or the way I sometimes feel that they are feeling. So I want to help everyone in any way I can, even when my advice hasn't always been asked for. So I've gone many rounds with myself to land in a space of being in service in a pure way with correct boundaries that goes both ways. There's also a very deep pattern inside of me of pushing towards goals, pushing until I can prove myself, pushing until I get what I think I want or need. I was now learning to just be and rather attract with a pulling nature rather than a pushing, trusting the divine timing of it all, having patience to trust that I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be at any given moment, that everything happens for a reason that I either contracted upon incarnation or attracted, that everything happens to show me what lessons there are left to learn, what blockages to be moved, what healing that needs to be done, that people come in and out of my life as they are supposed to, not attaching too much to specific outcomes. These days, I am focusing on manifesting a vibration that I want to be in, whether that be love, abundance, freedom, joy, and so on, and try to leave the rest up to the universe and not focus on the how too much. I try to spend a lot of time in gratitude for all the things I do have in my life already, to see how abundant I truly am. One of the greatest lessons that my father's passing, the trauma around my daughter, and my severe decline in health has brought me is that we only have here and now, and that nothing matters more than our health and well being. If we don't have that, we can't enjoy anything else. And speaking of enjoyment, I have also learned not to take things so seriously. I've been deeply rigid and strict through big parts of this journey. I felt that I had so little energy that that energy could only go to precise efforts for healing. I also thought that healing needed to be a struggle for it to work. But I forgot, or rather didn't realize, the healing power of having fun and letting loose and just releasing with ease and grace instead of the struggle. That is also what our inner child needs in order to heal and feel safe. It took me a good while before I could get to this point, but today I am grateful for everything that has happened to me and everything I have been through. Genuinely. I have released my victimhood. I have got my energy back, actually just a couple of months ago, leaving me on this healing journey for 11 years since my father died, 7 years since I got pregnant. So it took 7 years after all, like my friend said. But also, there actually isn't any starting or ending point to this journey. It's always ongoing and always will be. We just become greater masters of our own energy, get to know ourselves better, increase the ability to live a heart guided life, an authentic life that aligns with our path, find more purpose in the bigger scheme of things, but also cherish the day to day moments more. For me, connecting more lately to my deepest passion, which is music, has also done so much for my overall creativity. I've started a music course where I allowed myself to be a total newbie and where I'm learning to play guitar, play piano, and have actually written my own songs. I have even, in just a couple of weeks' time, gone from nothing to singing my own written songs, melody and lyrics, accompanying myself on the guitar in front of an audience. That is, for me, a huge stretch zone growth leap in so many ways. You have no idea. And the feeling is absolutely amazing. Like with the release and the contents of the podcast, I feel so immensely proud. Some say that the longest journey we ever make is the one from our head to our heart. For me, that has absolutely been true. I'm very mentally strong, and some might even say stubborn. I want to understand things, put things into frameworks, get a grip on things. So, boy oh boy, have I tried to surrender to those urges going on a journey like this, which has led me to create temporary frameworks that feel true to me for the time being, but also lean in fully to the one thing that we know for sure, that everything is always changing. This combination gives me a sense of control and flexibility at the same time, acceptance and trust, but also a remembrance that it's okay to change your mind. It's okay to increase your knowledge and inner wisdom and to change your mind accordingly. That is also why I'm a true believer of the own damn guru concept, because there is no one else that carries your unique soul, contracts, lifetime, life experiences, traumas, personality, masks, childhood, wounds than you. So there is no one else that can walk in your shoes and know the best way for you to go but you. Some might at times think that you are misstepping or choosing the wrong path in their opinion, but they don't know what is needed for you to find at the end of that potential and seemingly dead end. No one can reach your rock bottom but you. Only you know when the turning point has arrived. For me, it took death, severe trauma, and severe decline in my personal health. Hopefully, for you, it will take less, but it can also take more. Regardless, it is exactly how it's supposed to be for you. It's never too late and never too early. Everything has its divine timing and plan. Regardless of how your past looks, there's always a way forward. We need to spend less energy on judging and more time on compassion. Because what we see in another, we see in ourselves. The beauty you see in another resides in you. The anger you see in another resides in you. The power you see in another resides in you. We are all just mirroring each other, and we're all just walking each other home. With that said, thank you so much for taking the time for yourself by listening to my journey. Hopefully, it has inspired you in some way or made you feel less lonely. Hopefully, it has instilled hope for you that there is a way forward even in the darkest of times. Hopefully, it has made you want to become your own damn guru. Until next time.